Okay, today we're going to talk about the one question that all atheists fear, or at the very least, they really hate to try and answer this question.
So, not only am I planning on taking care of a topic that I've done to death on my channel, I'm also going to be debunking a 7-year-old video. I guess that's what listening to Jordan Peterson does to me. It makes me regress. Alright, so today we're going to be looking at another question that atheists can't answer, because that's not a topic that has been done to death, and I'm totally not scraping the bottom of the barrel for content.
I've been debating, going back and forth with atheists for just over a year now, and sometimes I feel like catnip, and I feel like they think they're the cat. They see a Christian and they want to pounce on me and play, and just like they do with everybody else.
Please define everybody else. I'm not really sure who else atheists are playing with besides, themselves. Insert masturbation joke here. But I'm really confused. What do you mean by playing with? I'm fairly certain you're not going to actually address this in the video, so I guess we'll just pretend that I never even said this.
And they always pose this question, and the question is, give me the evidence that Christianity is true, that Jesus is God, things of that nature.
You said they asked you a question, and then you formed a statement. I want you to understand that there is a clear difference between a question and a statement, and you don't seem to understand that. I guess we'll now consider this the statement that atheists have for you, and we will proceed as such. So,
I'll thinking they're honest, I'm going to go down the evidence, and I'll cite the scientific evidence, the historical evidence, the archaeological evidence, third-party evidence, fulfilled prophetic evidence, statistical probabilities. I'll cite the eyewitness accounts of over 500 people that saw the events.
Alright, so there seems to be a lot to get into here. First off, what scientific evidence do you have of the Bible? As far as I can tell, the two are as far juxtaposed to one another as you can get. If anything, many passages in the Bible have had to be twisted and malformed in order to fit with what we now understand as science. Just look at how much of the Genesis account has had to be retread through the lens of metaphor, as thanks to science, we now know the literal account simply could not happen. Light in the sky before the sun and stars are created, anyone? As for archaeological evidence, please go ahead and check on the archaeological evidence for the Exodus. You know, that story that was the foundation for the Pentateuch, and the Pentateuch being the biggest part of the Torah, leading to the Bible, that thing that the entire thing is built on? Apparently that didn't even happen as far as we've been able to tell. As far as third-party evidence, if we're talking about people like Josephus and Tacitus, then they have been pretty thoroughly debunked. Passages from Josephus have been inserted post hoc, and both Tacitus and Pliny the Younger don't even speak of Jesus himself, just that there were in fact Christians during that time. As far as prophecies go, the only prophecies I can tell that have actually come true within the Bible are prophecies that come true within the Bible. The only prophecies that have ever come true in reality are ones that have been so vague that literally 1,000 different circumstances could have been different and the prophecy could still be considered true. I would love to address specifics here, but he doesn't address specifics either, so that only leaves the eyewitness accounts and probabilities. The only probability I can find is the probability for a historical Jesus. I don't know how you would even begin to calculate the probability of the entire Bible being true. As for the 500 unnamed eyewitnesses, come on, you know that wouldn't hold up in any argument ever. Oh, who proposed this scientific theory? Oh yeah, just a scientist. Oh, what are their credentials? I don't know, but there's 500 of them. You know that's not going to work.
25,000 pieces of parchments and documents that are original and show that the text has never been altered.
If your book was wrong from the beginning, not altering the text does not add to its validity. Moreover, Prophet of Zod actually did a wonderful video about the quantitative evidence for the Bible. I'll throw a link to that video in the description for you guys.
I go through mountains and mountains of evidence, only to have them say at the end, well, that doesn't really count. That's not really evidence. You still don't have any proof that God exists, and you certainly don't have any proof that Jesus is God.
That's because you don't. You might have some evidence for some of the history of the Bible being true, but you certainly don't have any evidence for the outrageous claims that it makes about things outside of pure history. On top of that, even if you prove the historicity of Jesus, that only proves that he was a real man walking around in the flesh. It doesn't necessarily prove his divinity. Why do you think there are several atheists who have no problem taking the historicity of Jesus as fact?
Well, the first time I heard that, it was pretty stunning. I was actually stunned into silence. I didn't know what to say to that, because whenever you're speaking with somebody, you show them evidence, Naturally, you think that they're actually going to look at the evidence and find out for sure for themselves, like millions and actually billions of other people have done, that it actually does exist. But an atheist will just sort of brush it all aside and say that it doesn't really count.
Sure, some atheists might dismiss your claims. However, there are some atheists, myself included, that will actively investigate claims that sound like they actually have some legitimate viability. Unfortunately, what I've found to be almost unanimously the case is that most of the claims that are used to prove that a god exists either come up unsubstantial or incredibly weak. For instance, take the historicity of Jesus. You can prove that Jesus historically existed. That's fine, but that doesn't say anything about him being divine. You could even take Aquinas' 5 ways and use them to prove that a god exists, and that doesn't say anything about it being the God of the Bible. Which reminds me, I really need to get into doing that video.
Well, I came on the one question that all atheists fear and no atheist can answer by accident. Because one day I was so flustered I said, okay, show me the evidence you have to prove that God does not exist. And I got an answer like this. It was a blank stare.
That's probably because the process is usually that of debunking the positive claim, not trying to prove a negative claim. You assert the positive claim that God exists. We evaluate your evidence and find it lacking. Now granted, if this atheist is saying that God does not in fact exist, then they are positing a claim. But most atheists that I know generally will say they lack a belief in a God, meaning the burden of proof will be on you if you're there to claim a God. If you cannot prove that that God exists, then why should I believe that that God exists? I'm not saying that you shouldn't believe that God exists. Obviously, you find that evidence to be perfectly fine. But that doesn't mean that it's sufficient evidence for me or any of my peers.
They don't have evidence that God doesn't exist.
I also don't have evidence that morality sharding unicorns that bounce between this dimension and one that we can't see exist.
None. They never have. And the very thing they accuse Christians of having, which is blind faith, turns out is exactly what atheists have. They have no evidence to support their position. They have no evidence to support that God doesn't exist. So they live with a blind faith that God doesn't exist. I mean, I thought that was interesting and a little bit poetic. That's it for this video.
Well, please allow me to explain the difference between these two worldviews. My epistemology and my worldview are not predicated on a God existing or a God not existing. It just simply doesn't factor in. Your epistemology, on the other hand, probably hinges incredibly hard on a God existing. Specifically, your version of a God. There isn't necessarily faith involved when you don't have a belief in a God. However, your book does have a pretty clear definition of what type of faith is required for your religion. You know, the whole faith is confidence in things not seen. Again, I'm not saying you couldn't or shouldn't believe, but I'm saying that you haven't given me a good enough reason to believe. And your question that atheists can't answer is a bad question to begin with. With that said, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please make sure to like if you liked it, subscribe if you haven't already. The usual links will be in the description below, and before we get into the Patreon slides, everyone, as always, insert end of video tagline here.